Welcome to the channel, and this is another part of my decade build series. If you haven't seen the other one, or the other ones, I'll provide a link down below, as well as in the top right corner, as I usually do. But yeah, so we are in the late 70s now, and we're going to be doing the 80s next week, which I'm pretty excited about because there's, two main styles of the 80s, and I'm kind of grateful for that because I usually do 2 decade builds for the decade that we're focusing on. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for that, and we're getting closer to finishing this series, so it's a little sad, I'm not gonna lie, but it's been really great, and I've learned a lot from it, and I think I've improved a lot from it too. So yeah, I'm grateful for it. And as I normally do, I like to show you guys some reference pics that I used to build this house. And so as you can see on the left, there is a lot of brown, and the rug pretty much matches the couch. And there's a lot of wood paneling, a lot of rock. This is an example of a split level house from the 70s, and on the right there's more brown, some floral wallpaper, and in all of its glory. So at first I wanted to do almost like a Spanish styled home, and because there's a very obscure style that was popular during this time, which was reminiscent of Spanish-style homes, which was called Old West. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a lot of information or history about that style of home, so I decided to just scrap it and attempt to do a proper split-level house, because split-level homes were very popular from the 50s through the 60s and into the 70s, where it kind of just, fell away from popularity. A lot of people bought these homes in the 80s because they were affordable, and they were pretty good for a larger family while still being affordable. So that was what I wanted to focus on for the late 70s, since it peaked in popularity during the late 70s. And the only way I knew how to do this was to basically build the first floor technically in the basement level. So just imagine that the left side of the house is at a higher elevation than where the garage is. So that portion would actually be lower. And in order to get into the house this way, I had to put stairs and going into the actual build. So it looks kind of strange, but I hope it gets the idea across of what I'm trying to do. But yeah, so about the 70s, after the first oil shock in 1973, gas was rationed in many countries, and Europe particularly depended on the Middle East for oil. And the United States was also affected. Even though we had our own oil reserves, we were still affected pretty badly by it. And many European countries introduced car-free days and weekends, and customers with a license plate ending in an odd number were only allowed to buy gas on odd numbered days and things like that. So it was kind of complicated and strange at this time. Basically, in the late 70s and also in the early 70s too, the realization that oil reserves are not endless and technological developments were not sustainable without potentially harming the environment, ended the belief in limitless progress that had existed since the 19th century. As a result, ecological awareness rose substantially, which had a major effect on the economy, which I mentioned in the previous decade build. So people were more eco-minded in the 70s, and I think that reflected a lot in the interior design. So the one side of the 70s was very modern, kind of like eco-friendly or whatever, and then another part of the 70s was very almost like a mixture of traditional and that modern that we're kind of familiar with, in the 60s and 70s. But it was almost like trying to go back to a more simpler time, this style was. A feminist who had inherited the leadership position of the civil rights movement from her husband, Coretta Scott King, as a leader of the Black movement, called for an end to all discrimination, helping and encouraging the women's liberation movement and other movements as well. At the National Women's Conference in 1977, a minority women's resolution promoted by King and others passed to ensure racial equality in the movement's goals. So during this time, especially in the late 70s, women were experiencing greater liberation, more opportunities in the workforce, where previously men dominated. So women had a lot more freedom, I think, during this time. Some technological advances, which included the Apple Computer Company, which was founded in 1976. They released the Apple II in 1977, which, by the way, costed almost $5,000 US. So just by comparison, the computers that are available today. And that was just for the CPU only. So can you imagine? I can't. And then the Sony Walkman was built in 1978 by Japanese audio division engineer, which ushered in personal handheld music. So handheld music goes back as far as the late 70s, which I thought was really cool. So the second half of the decade of the 70s saw the rise of punk rock, when a kind of like a fresh young rock groups were playing stripped down hard rock. When they came to prominence at the time, when most of the artists associated with the 60s and early 70s were kind of declining in popularity, punk bands such as the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Ramones, the Talking Heads, and a few others became super popular. But statistically, Led Zeppelin was the most successful musical group of the 70s, having sold more than 300 million records since 1969. In the late 1970s, we also saw the beginning of hip-hop music, with disc jockeys like DJ Kool and Africa Bambaataa taking loops from funk and soul records and play them repeatedly at block parties and dance clubs. And at the end of the 70s, popular songs like Rapper's Delight by Sugar Hill Gang gave hip-hop a much wider audience. Star Wars, which first released in theaters in 1977, became an instant pop culture icon, I would say almost overnight. By the way, who's excited for December? I know I am. Saturday Night Fever, which was also released in 1977, was arguably the start of disco mania in the US. And also Thank God It's Friday, which released in 1978. They contributed to disco's rise in mainstream popularity. Disco was the last mass popular music movement that was driven by the baby boom generation, and disco was a worldwide kind of trend, but its popularity drastically declined in the US in 1980, and by 1982, it had lost most of its mainstream popularity in the States. By the end of the 1970s, a strong anti-disco sentiment developed among rock fans and musicians, particularly in the US. Disco was criticized as mindless, consumeristic, overproduced, and escapist. The slogans, quote, "Disco sucks" and "Death to Disco" became common, and rock artists such as Rod Stewart and David Bowie, who added disco elements to their music, were accused of being sellouts, and also lava lamps were a thing at this time. So as far as the house goes, like I said before, back in the 1950s and 60s, the split-level home, sometimes called raised ranches, began to emerge, and at the time, the style appealed to a wide range of families and buyers because it was kind of like a fresh design, and it was a lot bigger than the more modest bungalows that dominated many neighborhoods at this time. Yet, they could be affordably built on smaller lots than a ranch house, because ranch houses are very wide, and they're very, they can be very big, but, wide, so they would have to be on bigger lots. The split-level design is believed to have derived from the ranch originally, which in turn was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright's low-profile, horizontal prairie homes, Usonian houses, which, by the way, Frank Lloyd Wright is one of my favorite architects, and I plan on maybe building a prairie-style home in the near future. It's on my to-do list, don't worry. The split levels divided public and private spaces through short half levels, and the split usually and was originally a way to build on sloping sites, like multi-level terrain, kind of. It was kind of a way to fix that issue. But the interior visual connections it created were so popular, it became a part of a new style. With more families moving into the suburbs after World War II, many wanted a house that was a bit bigger and grander than the modest bungalows that veterans previously purchased with their GI Bill funds. The design gained a bigger following after the TV sitcom The Brady Bunch aired in 1969, and America saw how a split-level house worked well for Mike and Carol Brady and their huge family of 6 kids, and of course Alice, the housekeeper. Can't forget Alice. The exterior of the Brady's house was modeled on one built in 1959 by Luther and Louise Carson in San Fernando Valley, which is in California. In many communities, entire subdivisions were constructed with these split levels, and they're also called ramblers, which is basically a ranch with a basement. They're also often referred to as tri-level. A split level is more of a building type than it is a style, though, and it of course retains the low-pitched roof, overhanging eaves, and horizontal lines of the ranch. In these homes added a 2-story unit connected at mid-height to a 1-story. The popularity of a split level derived in part from its modern layout and the differentiation from more traditional housing styles of the mid-century, such as the minimal traditional, the colonial revival, Cape Cods, and bungalow-style cottages. Split levels maximized their curbside presence, so to speak, and square footage, and minimized costs without requiring larger lots and full basements. The style provided the ideal balance between the builder's goal of making a profit and the buyer's goal of getting as much house as possible for their money, which was important, especially during this time, considering the economy that was kind of in the dumps. So at this point, I thought, there's not really a lot of room down below the house, so I thought it would be a good idea to add like almost an addition to the house, which I ended up making a kids' room and their own ensuite bathroom, which I guess could be used as a guest bathroom as well, in case you don't want your guests to go down below the house to use the guest bathroom. But I guess like the main part, this living room up here would be almost like a formal living room, and then down below would be a living room that is way less informal and more I don't know, functional in a way, like where the kids would go with their friends, and which you'll see in a little bit. But I was really inspired by a few different things. I was inspired by the Brady Bunch. I was inspired by that 70s show. I was inspired by, just pictures in general, and just the, just the design of it all. Like, the 70s interior design is very special. I like the idea of having, these shelves on the side here on top of the mirror. So, instead of having like a cabinet or something like that, just so there's a little extra space to put whatever you might need. And since this is a boys' bathroom, I don't know, I thought it would be kind of nice. And I also, in my head, I imagine a mom and a dad lives here, as well as a teenage boy and a teenage girl, and then a child boy. So quite a big family. And at first I thought I, wanted to have the bed just kind of by itself, but I really wanted to make a bunk bed. And unfortunately, it's not functional, and I think there's a mod or some type of CC that allows you to have a bunk bed. So here I was just like raising up some beds to be on top of each other, and then using the slats that came with City Living to, kind of anchor it to something. I did want to give the impression of there being a ladder of some kind on the side, so I was trying to use these shelves, which looked okay, but unfortunately it kind of blocked the Sims path to get to the bed. So I just did away with the shelves, and I raised up the bed just a little bit before I uploaded it to the gallery. So the bed is functional, but the bed on top is not, unless you have a mod, I think. But yeah, and if you do download this from the gallery and, want to remodel it, rightly so, I would love to see your screenshots on Twitter. My @ name on there is Irrelephantsims, and my @ name on the gallery is Irrelephant7. So you should be able to find it, but if not, let me know and I'll try to link it to you. But yeah, I really enjoyed making this build. It was so much fun. A little bit cringy, I'm not gonna lie, especially the brown fuzzy carpet in the living room. But, hashtag historically accurate, I had to be. So the main space down here is basically, like I said before, an informal living room and play area for the kids. So in here you have some seating and another TV set. By this time, TVs were pretty affordable, so, most people had a color TV at this point. And you probably are saying, hey, this looks a lot like that 70s show. And you're right. I was heavily inspired by that 70s show for this space. And because, well, for one thing, I love that show. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So I had to pay a homage to it because it is the late 70s, and I mean, I just had to. So I hope you guys don't mind a little bit of that. And I thought this was kind of a good space to put also like a desk of some sort. So I loved this idea, and shout out to Simlissy for figuring this out. Basically, you take 2 stoves and then you use the counters on top of the stoves and like bring them out a little bit from the wall, and you get the buttons of the stove, but it looks like a washer and dryer. So thank you, Simlissy, for that brilliant idea, and I thoroughly enjoyed how it looked. because what I was doing before was just using counters and then like pool lights to kind of make it look like a washer and dryer, but I don't know, it just like the buttons from the stoves make it look so much more realistic, and I really, really like that. And of course, you know, with the Eco Living Pack coming out soon, we're going to have washers and dryers, I think, ideally. So perhaps I can replace those and re-upload it, but for now, you know, we have to make do with what we have. So this room here is supposed to be the master bedroom, and it's very funky, and I kind of like it, but I end up changing, I think, the flooring to something else because it was just way too much for me, and I couldn't do it. So this little nook here next to the front door I thought would be a perfect space for a vanity of some kind, and nothing really was looking how I wanted it to look as far as like style wise, so I just went with the vintage glamour one, and because it has a little drawer in it and it's more this style at least, so yeah. And then you know, just adding some sconces so there's some lighting for the mom to put her makeup and stuff. And I liked these you know, picture frames of maybe her kids when they're in sports or something on her vanity. So I haven't really used these curtains before, I don't think, but they looked very 70s, early 80s to me, so I think I might use them more often, especially in the builds that I build for the 80s, because they're just perfect. And I really liked this bed, but I didn't really like the headboard, so I decided to use these accent tables on top of each other, and I just kind of raised one slightly, so it looks like the headboard is more elaborate than it actually is. And by the way, guys, I hope you know this by now, but if you do download this, make sure you have the Move Objects sheet on, because I use a lot of that in this build, and I pretty much do for all my builds, so safe to say that, you know, always have it on before you place a lot. This is probably the ugliest room in the house. And I'm not just being harsh on myself. I'm telling you guys, like, I saw a few different pictures of 70s bathrooms, and there's a lot of orange, green, and brown in these bathrooms, and so I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but I took the fall for you guys just to be accurate. Even though, you know, I was like, no, I can't do it, orange tiles, oh, it's gross, but and you know, it's actually really difficult to find reference pictures for 70s interiors, like as far as actual examples, because I feel like a lot of 70s interiors have been remodeled since then, and they've just kind of mostly been erased from our minds and our history. So it was really difficult to find reference that made sense for me, but I managed and I did it, you guys. So this is the teenage girl's bedroom, and I wanted to go a little bit more on the groovy disco side of things, and I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity because, you know, she's probably really trendy and she enjoys music, and yeah, so that's kind of where I was going for her bedroom. So it's a lot more groovy, as you would say, than the rest of the house. I also noticed that plaid was really popular during this time, and I really wanted to use a plaid, like a plaid wallpaper. The one that we have in game, it's kind of like a picnic blanket, but the colors weren't bright enough for me, unfortunately. So I thought that this one that came with the kids, or the toddler update, I thought this one would be really cute, and I love the colors in it. So I thought that, you know, matched really well with the rest of the room and the rest of the color scheme in here. So yeah, I was really happy with how this turned out. You know, there's not really, you know, a window that would make sense down here, so I used the windows with the shutters that are closed, because, I don't know, I thought it made it look kind of realistic, because there would still be windows down here, technically, because it wouldn't all be, you know, in a basement. It would just be at a lower elevation. So I thought maybe, you know, because we can't have actual windows, that would make it look a little nicer. So this here is kind of like the guest bath, or the bathroom that the teenager girl would use, or any guests that are down here, they'd probably use this bathroom. But yeah, so I'm pretty much done with the build. I'm just gonna be finishing this bathroom and adding a few more things here and there. But thank you guys so much for watching and for supporting me and my channel. Definitely comment down below and I'll answer you and give you some love. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you next time. Bye.